In this video, we're going to talk about how to do an in-memory lookup. So in our job where we loaded our sales file into our transaction table in SQL Server, we have a product ID inside that table. And what we want to do is we want to load up a list of products in memory so that we can validate if they're a valid product or not. So basically what I want to do here is I want to kind of move things down a little bit to make myself a little bit of room. And then I want to pull a memory table object here. So what this object allows you to do is go out and query a database and bring a record set back completely into memory. So it's not stored physical anywhere. It's completely all up in memory, and it's based on, the lookup is based on a key. So it allows you to do very fast lookups when you're reading the data in. So when I'm reading this sales file in, every record that passes through here, I can jump up here and do a lookup against that table to validate that it exists. So I just want to connect it into my transformation object here. And then I want to double click on that object to define it. And what I'll get is a wizard that will walk me through the process. So I'm using SQL Server. I can look at OLADB, ODBC, which will basically get you to any database in the world. And then we have specific drivers for SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, etc. I can also import from a single table, meaning I want to pull the entire table into memory, or I can import from a specific SQL query that I provide. So for instance, if you need to join a few tables together to provide your final output that you want to load into memory, you can do that as well. So I'm just going to point to a single table that I have out there. And then I'm just going to use my favorites here that I had set up previously. So this is my local machine. And I'm going to point to my SQL Server database. And I'm going to pull in my products table. So I have a table out here that has all my products loaded into it. So I'm going to pick that table. And the next thing it does is it pulls in the available fields from that table. So I don't really need all of these fields to be in a memory, because really all I want to do in this particular case is I just want to look up the item ID and maybe the item number, and maybe the UPC might be helpful, and just for debugging purposes, if I want to be able to look at it, maybe an item description might be useful. So I don't have to load all of the fields into memory. In fact, you want to kind of keep it to the bare minimum so that you can fit more data in memory. The next thing that you want to do is you want to tell it what the key is. Okay? So what are you going to be looking up on as the data flows through the system here? What are you going to be looking up on to validate that that value exists in the lookup? Okay? And in this case, that's the item ID. So what I do is I just check it to make sure, to say that's my key. And that's it, I'm finished. So now this memory table will know how to go out to that database, pull in all that information into memory, and then be able to perform lookups on it as the data flows through my transformation here. So you're probably wondering now, how do I join these two things together? How do I tell it that I want to be able to look up the item ID in here to the item ID in here? So if you double click on the transformation, you'll notice now that we have two input objects. We have the original sales file, and we have the product lookup information. Now the way that I want to join these two things is I have my item ID here, and I have my item ID down here, and you'll notice they're not even named the same thing. I want to be able to join those two things together. So the way that I do that is this icon right here is my joins icon, and I'm going to click on that, and now I just simply tell it that I want to join the item ID from my sales file to my item ID in my lookup table. Now the nice thing here is that I can drag this over and just join it up, so this joins to this now, but I can also do some transformation code behind on this. So for instance, say my item ID comes in with an additional prefix like 1-123, and I need to strip that one dash off the front of it, I can do that. I would just click on here and do a little bit of transformation if I needed to. Okay, so I'm going to click OK here. So now these two things are joined up based on the join that I set up here against those two. Now, as the data flows through, it's going to look up each product. And then what I can do is put a filter on the data. So as the data is flowing through here, I can say as long as my item ID from my sales file exists in my product lookup, then allow it to flow through. Okay, so I have a filter icon right here. I could just click on that. Okay, and you'll notice all I have to do is this function here is called allow pass-through, and it returns a Boolean true or false. And I'm just writing a little bit of code here to say as long as the product exists, either allow it to pass through or don't allow it to pass through. And I'm going to do that by returning a true or false. And you'll notice that by default it returns true for everything, meaning everything's going to be allowed to pass through. So what I can do is say if the product is found, okay, so the found property is a special property on lookup tables, in-memory lookup tables, that allow you to determine whether the value was found or not. So I can say if found equals true, then return true, else return false. So basically what I'm saying here is as long as the product was found, then return true and allow that record to pass through. Otherwise return false. Okay, so you're probably thinking, well, you know, this is the very verbose way of saying this. I'm really saying the same thing here. But, you know, you could also just say return a1.found, and that will return your true or false. You could do it that way as well. So I'll just leave that there as a comment. Okay, so this is the long verbose way of saying it, and this is the shortened version of saying that. Okay, so now I'm just going to hit OK here. And whenever you put a filter in, all you have to do, if you want to know what's in that filter, you can just hover your mouse over this filter icon and you can see it down here at the bottom. It shows you what code behind is there. Okay, so I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to compile this job and run it. Okay, so now if I run this job, what we're going to see in the monitor now is an additional line here that says, oh, okay, well, here's your memory table lookup, and I just loaded 65 records into it. So I pulled 65 records into memory. And then as I processed the data, I read my sales file, and I did my product lookup, and I read 16,000 records, and I found a match for 16,000 records, and I wrote out 16,000 records. Okay, so basically we found a match on every record that flowed through the system. So now what we want to do, just for fun, is let's go over to our products table here. And let's delete one of our items, our products. Okay, so here's our products table, and here's our item ID. And just for fun, I'm going to say delete from products table where item ID in 1 or 2. So I'm going to delete a couple products out of my product table. Okay, so now if I go back and I rerun this job, what we should see is that it didn't find a match on some of those. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and monitor this. So now what you'll see is that it loaded 63 records into memory. And as I read 16,000 records from my sales file, but I only found matches for 15,000 records. So only 15,000 records got written to my transaction table. Okay, so that's that filter that basically said only allow records to pass through if you find a match on the products table. Okay, so So if I kind of go back here and look at this, as the records flow through here, only allow the ones where I have matches to pass through. Okay. So now you can have multiple in-memory lookups as well. So just for fun, we'll just kind of throw another one out here. Okay. So now I have two lookups going on. Now as I read the sales file, it'll bump up against this product, and now I'm going to do a stores one. I'm going to say, as long as it's a valid store ID, allow that also to pass through. So let's go run through this again and just kind of quickly set up our table here, show you how fast we can do this. I'm just going to point this to my SQL Server. I'm going to pick my stores table, and I'm just going to tell it that my store ID is the key that I want to look up on. Okay, that's it. My store table will be loaded into memory now. Okay, and then I can just rename it. Okay, so now I need to go into my transformation, and oh look, I got three now. I got sales file, I got my product lookup, and I have my store lookup. Okay, now what I need to do is I need to join up the store ID from my sales file to my store ID key in my store lookup. And again, we do that through the join here. So I just click the join, and then I can come over to here and I can just pick my sales file and pick my store ID and just drag it and drop it over. And what I'm saying here is that I want to match up my store ID from my sales file to the store ID in the store lookup table. Say OK. And then if I want, I can put an additional filter on. Okay, so I can go into my filters and I can say if A1 is found, which is the products, and A2 is found, which is my store, then allow it to pass through. Okay, so basically what I'm saying is as long as both products and stores are found, allow that to pass through. If one or the other is not found, don't allow it to pass through. So I'm going to click OK here, and then recompile the job. And I'm going to run it. And now what we're going to see is even more. So what we'll see here is I got one memory table for my products, and I got a second memory table for my stores, here I loaded 13,000 records. And in this case, I read 16,000 records from my sales file, and I found 16,000 matches against my store file. Okay. So as we continue to do things in our ETL job design, everything kind of flows through this guy right here. This is the transformation object. This is where the logic happens, and the cleansing, and the matching, and the filtering, and all that kind of stuff. This is the brain of the operations right here. Everything else is just this is my reader object, this is the write object, and these are my in-memory lookup objects. But all the logic that happens right here in the transformation. Okay, so that is how you do in-memory lookups.